So, Tradespert, we'll start with Everton. And obviously you've made a few big signings over the off-season in the managerial department with Koeman and Walsh being appointed by the club. How do you see that impacting your ability to take that next step up and compete with the bigger clubs?
Well, from a fan's perspective, I think it does show serious intent because whilst there hasn't been any money being spent, I think that it shows that the club's going in the right direction. Because I think both Walsh and Koeman are very big coups for the club. And without Mashiri, the new major shareholder, I seriously doubt whether we would have been able to sign either of these guys. So personally, I think we've got the two potential huge keys going forward for us. In all honesty, I think Koeman was probably not the top of my list, but the top of my list was Jose Mourinho, then Unai Emery, and they've gone to PSG and Manchester United, two clubs that we're not going to be able to match with in many, many ways.
And
so
you
I think,
also linked with Pellegrini, weren't you?
Yeah, we were linked with Pellegrini, somebody who I personally wasn't overly sold on.
Okay.
I think behind Mourinho and Emery, who were probably never going to happen, I think Koeman was the right man for the job. I think Pellegrini was a little bit unproven to me on the transfer market. Tactically, I think he's actually quite a good manager and has a lot of experience. But yeah, I just don't really back him in on the transfer market. And I think he's tried. You know what you're going to get out of him. Koeman's somebody that has had a ridiculous amount of success as a player and quite a good amount of success as a manager who's still reasonably young in the manager game. So yeah, I'm very excited going forward with Walsh and Koeman at the helm.
And then you've obviously had a breakthrough in the transfer market recently with the signing of Gay from Aston Villa. Do you expect a couple more signings to be coming in?
Well, I hope so. No, I'm quite confident that they will be quite active. I've been saying for a long time now it's finally going to start happening, and it's a bit scary that we're going to be going into the start of the season quite underdone. Like we've signed Stecklenburg as well, but realistically he's now going to go into the Tottenham game next Saturday as our first choice keeper, and that just doesn't sit too well with me. Jagielka's only just back at training, so there's no way he's going to be fit and ready to start. Whether Stones will play, I'm presuming he'll play if he's still at the club, but if we sell Stones over the next week, Jagielka's not fit, that just leaves Funes Mori and one of the kids, probably Holgate, will have to play centre-back against Tottenham. And in the Premier League, 3 points can be the difference between multiple positions. So if you don't start the season well, that'll stick with you for the whole season, as well as Tottenham seen earlier on, as JD was saying earlier in the podcast. So I'm scared that we're currently underdone, but yeah, I'm confident that the transfers will finally start rolling in. I think we sort of need to have that big transfer, and then that'll sort of show the other targets, oh wait, Everton's serious.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, Everton's serious, and then hopefully that can be a way of the floodgates start opening and we finally start spending some money.
JD, I'm sure is sitting there licking his lips at the sound of how you're going into that game. Did you have anything you wanted to ask about Everton?
So who does seem likely to sign there between now and the end of the window?
Well, it's been sort of a strange window because you have your little papers and pretty crappy sources linking clubs with every single player, but any serious links have been over the same players. So Ashley Williams is somebody who I'm still confident will be able to sign. Swansea City knocked back a $10 million offer, according to just about everybody. So, which surprised me quite a bit because I thought £10 million for somebody who's just about 32, even though he's a top class player, I think that's quite a bit of money. So Sky Sports have reported that we've come back with a £12 million offer, and nothing's really been said over the last day or two. So hopefully we can sign him. I expect Stones to go. So that would then mean that somebody else will have to come in. Koulibaly from Napoli would be an absolutely amazing recruit. I seriously think outside of the top clubs, he's the best centre back going around. I'm talking about like at Manchester, Barca, Real, all those sort of clubs. So I think he would be an outstanding recruit.
Is that a likely get though, or is that a bit?
I think we seriously could get him if Chelsea pull out of the race. Yeah. I expect Chelsea to be able to sign him. I'd expect him to pick Chelsea over us, but if Chelsea pull out, like they've been linked with Manolas from Roma, if they sign somebody like him or Mustafi from Valencia, if they get somebody else, then that'll rule them out of the race, and I seriously think that we can, because nobody else is going to, well, we're reported to, but I can't see anybody else spending over £40 million currently on a centre back.
And you touched on a bit earlier in it, but how likely is it that Stones and Lukaku in particular would be leaving in the window?
I expect Stones to go. I think it's just a matter of both Everton and Manchester City being really stubborn. Everton want the 50 mil. I think City will eventually pay it, but they'll pay it when when they're ready to do it, or it might be the way the payments come across, or add-ons, or whatever they want to do to work out the deal. I expect Stones to go. I'm quietly confident on Lukaku staying. I know there's been all the Chelsea links, but I just can't see why Chelsea need another striker of that standard. Like, if they want to bring in a fresh new young striker, somebody who can work their way into the team, but I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but is it Batshuayi, or who they've just signed from Marseille? Yeah. They've just spent 30 mil on him. They've got Costa and Lukaku. They're three players that are all going to be wanting to play every single week. And how do you fit that? Conte usually plays with one striker, I believe. So how are three players going to start every single week who all play the same position? I just don't see it happening. And you can't replace a player like Lukaku, I feel. As we sort of touched on with Arsenal earlier in the podcast, there's your Messis, there's your Neymar, Aguero, Lewandowski, all that sort of players. But other than those sort of names at the big clubs, there's no strikers that Everton could come close to who would be able to sign that's of Lukaku's standards. So I just think that we have to fight tooth and nail to hold him, and I'm confident that we will.
Well, then I guess we'll move on and chat about Liverpool quickly, one of your favourite teams, I'm sure, Tradespert. And in contrast, they've been quite active in the transfer window with a fair few signings coming in, such as Matip, Karius, Mane, Clavan, and Wijnaldum. While they've also managed to sell quite a few players for impressive fees. I mean, Allen for 13 million, Ibe for 15 million, just as a couple of them. Is just 28 million between them. So they've managed to recoup a lot of the amount that they've spent in the window. Do we see that those signings as giving them that push towards top four, or do we still see them as that rung below?
I don't see why they can't challenge for fourth. I think, in all honesty, I currently have the two Manchester clubs and Chelsea as just about lock-ins for the top three. I think the race for that last championship spot will be incredibly interesting. There's a lot of class in and around there. I think, obviously, Tottenham will be right there. No reason Tottenham can't push on to try and finish top three. Arsenal, you can never rule them out. The masters of finishing fourth. And I sort of probably currently rank Liverpool behind those two clubs. And then there's Leicester City, who we cannot forget won the league last year, so you can't just act like they're not there anymore. So I sort of think that Everton and Liverpool will actually be in a very similar sort of position. I think fourth will be the goal, but I currently see them probably finishing sixth, probably about sixth. They'll be probably behind Tottenham and Arsenal, and then obviously the three bigger clubs.
And what do you think, JD? Where do you reckon Liverpool can aim to finish?
Yeah, they could definitely make top four. It's just that, in midfield they're I still think a little bit light on, a bit weak. Chan's a very, very good player, but Still not sure about Henderson. I think Joe Allen could have done a job in a different setup. He showed that for Wales at the Euros. He's quite a good player, but they've sold him and brought in. Have they brought in any central midfielders? Maybe
Well,
Wijnaldum?
they're going to try and play Wijnaldum there, yeah.
Which
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
he's
kind
a
of
central
robbing.
midfielder.
Yeah, that's kind of robbing his best assets. I think we're getting into the box and scoring, but yeah, I think that front four, they've probably got 6-7 guys that can play through there that are very, very good. I think Mane will be a great signing. Just also how many points Mignolet could cost them and Moreno. They haven't solved those problems permanently.
Well, they did sign young Karius from the young German goalkeeper.
That's still an unknown, and now he's got a broken hand.
Which is,
So he's out for a couple of months. But you never know. Like he's pretty young in goalkeeping terms, so he might be obviously better than Mignolet, but he'll still probably have his moments where he costs him a few points.
He's a project as well. I think he has all the tools to be a really good player, but he's still really young and he needs to adjust to the England. That living in England and working his way into this team, I think he'll be
with the big sides like West Brom and stuff like that.
No, but I think Karius could honestly go down in this transfer window as their best recruit. I really like the signing of him, but he is a project. He's not going to be a world-class keeper overnight. It'll take him quite a few seasons to develop, and keepers generally do need to get quite a few full seasons under their belt to really kick on. So, got to give him time. Can't expect him to fix up their leaky goals.
Yeah. And I think it'll be a good season for them.
It's interesting as well, though, because speaking of Mignolet and their keeping situation, it reminds me of the issues with Bogdan that they had last season. And I think Jod and a few others on the board have argued that they'll finish a fair few points better off because they'll have either Mignolet or Karius in goal rather than someone like Bogdan. But for every result against Watford they had where they had a calamitous performance, they also had a fair few decent performances against sides like Chelsea and Man City, who I'm not sure if they'll do as well against this season.
Match that, yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing with them is that they showed in the Europa League they're quite a good cup team. So it'll either be a case of, they're really pushing for a top 3 spot or, Klopp just eyes off an FA Cup or something like that, where on any given day they could beat anyone. Guys like Mane have a bit of a record now of doing well against top teams. So, yeah.
A question, well, I don't actually know what a Liverpool fan would ask, but I agree. I think Cup's Liverpool's greatest way of immediate success at the moment. Klopp needs to get his stamp, but whether Liverpool would be okay with finishing somewhere like 6th or 7th or even 8th if it meant they won a cup, or to solely focus on the league, have no cup success, but then get a Champions League spot. So there's 2 ways of getting success, I feel. Liverpool fans will probably be saying, why can't we do both? But I think there's 2 ways of success. It's either, the domestic cup. I don't even know if are they in Europe this season?
No, I don't think so.
There's an FA Cup's of course always a good thing to win some silverware, but nowadays it's not as shown the respect to the FA Cup that it was once.
And then obviously Klopp signed a new 6-year deal in the off-season as well, which is basically a 4-year extension, given he had 2 years to run on his existing deal. What do we make of that? Do we see that as a good sign of confidence from both parties?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic sign of confidence. I think, his first deal was 3.5 years. So that's quite a shorter term contract for any manager, to be honest. They like to knuckle a manager down for a long time, and I can't even remember who said it, but as somebody stated earlier in the podcast, paid out of manager's nothing. So the fact that he was on such a short term early contract, to me, I sort of thought that Klopp might use this Liverpool as sort of a stepping stone almost to get back up to a really, really big gig like a Real or a Barcelona. But I sort of think that this shows that Klopp is serious about Liverpool. Klopp wants to build almost a bit of a dynasty here, and I think he's the right man for the job. I actually love Jurgen Klopp. I would rate him as a really, really good manager. I love the passion that he shows. And I think it's a great sign of confidence for both Klopp to get such a long contract from a club of Liverpool's stature, and it's also fantastic for Liverpool to get a manager of Klopp's stature in on such a long contract. So I think it's a huge positive for the club.
We'll move on then, and we'll chat about the promoted clubs, and we'll start with the two automatic promoted clubs and work down to that club that went up in the playoffs places if we have to talk about them a bit later on. But we'll start with Middlesbrough and Burnley. Middlesbrough first up, and they've made quite a few impressive signings in the off-season. They've got Valdez in on a free transfer, whilst they've managed to get Negredo on a loan contract where I believe they've got that obligation to buy at the end of it. I assume only if they stay in the Premier League, but it might be regardless. And then they've made a couple of other signings such as Ramirez and Guzan on free transfers as well. So they've bolstered their squad quite impressively and really look like they're aiming for that sort of 10th to 13th sort of finish.
Yeah, and also they signed Victor Fisher, was it, from the Ajax winger?
Old
and
FM Wonder Kid.
Yeah. So if he can do what he did in the game, he'll definitely light it up there. But yeah, there's been some interesting signings. I think, and you'd know more. SM Karanka is pretty highly thought of, I guess.
Yep.
Was he Mourinho's assistant?
Yeah, I think he was Mourinho's assistant at Real Madrid, so I think he used that to his advantage to get a few decent signings for Borough when he first went across with a few Chelsea players on loan.
It'll be interesting to see, how he actually does go tactically against, better sides and stuff like that, because I think that's the key for a lot of these promoted sides is their manager. If they can adapt quite well and find a tactic for them, there's no reason they can't finish mid-table.
He's got the tools at his disposal. Like they've had a really good transfer window, I feel, for a club that's just been promoted. You could have had a club of, I don't know, a Crystal Palace could have signed a lot of these players, and we would be talking like they've recruited pretty well. So for a newly promoted team, I also like the fact that they've got a bit of experience, like Negredo, Valdez, Ramirez, like Aguzan. These are players that have played at a high standard for many years, so they know what it takes to stay around in the Premier League. And I think, or even though Guzan last season didn't, but I think that having that experience helps the players that haven't played in the Premier League before adjust to the standard and the pace and the physicality. So I think they will have no problems dodging relegation.
They've also got Stuart Downing, who made the really impressive decision to drop down a division last season to play for them and try and get them promoted, which obviously ended up working out quite well. On the Karanka front, the interesting point in our discussions earlier about managers changing tactics or changing philosophies to bow to sort of external pressures is an interesting one when it comes to him, because he had a lot of issues during the season where I think the board probably signed a couple of players like Downing and also Jordan Rhodes in January, who he didn't necessarily want, and so he didn't initially play them as much as the fans wanted. And I think the fans for a while cried out for him starting with two strikers up top, and he had a bit of a strop and almost left the club at one point because he played two up front in a couple of games and they started to go on a really bad run where they couldn't win any game. And he basically had a go at the fans and the media and said, well, I hope the fans are happy because I'm playing two up front, but we're not winning any games. And he actually got to a point where he left the club for a game and they had a caretaker in charge, and everyone thought he'd actually... Yeah, they thought he was going to quit the club, but thankfully from their point of view he managed to reconcile their differences and came back in charge. But no, I just thought it'd be an interesting point to add to that discussion about the philosophies, because I mean, that's an example, I suppose, where you've got a manager who does kind of bow to the pressure eventually, and it doesn't actually work out.
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely worked under Jose Mourinho before. After hearing that, I didn't know that, but yes, he definitely used to work with Jose.
Yeah, and so obviously, I mean, Stuart Downing coming back up with him's probably a decent player to watch out for, because as you guys say, they've got quite a few players now who've got that experience in the top division. He'll help them out. Negredo's the interesting one because, I mean, he was so good early for Man City, but he had that injury. Was it a back injury or something? And he really struggled after that, and even struggled at Valencia. So, look, I mean, if he can get 6 or 7 goals for them, that's probably all they want out of him. But it's gonna be quite interesting. And then obviously Valdez as keeper.
A striker at a club of that standard, though, doesn't have the pressure to go and score 25 goals in a season, whereas when he was playing at Manchester City, that's the standard, that's what needs to be done. But as you said, if he can, like, he's not going to play every week, but if he can get 9 goals from mid-20s, early 30 appearances, then that'll be an exceptional goal ratio for a player of a club that's just been promoted. So and there's no reason why he can't. I think he's a really good striker, proven at a top level. I know he's had his injuries and he's aging a little bit, but there's nothing stopping him from being a really good striker. And I'm also personally a little excited to see how Jordan Rhodes can go in the Premier League. Like, he's tore the Championship up for years, and I'm still surprised that no Premier League club actually took the punt on him. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does go.
When we sold Shane Long 2 seasons ago, and I think we got about 12 million for him, we did put a bid in for Rhodes for about 10 million because I think Bruce was really keen on him, and I have a sense that it was basically accepted, and then the Venkies at Blackburn basically turned around last minute and actually changed their mind. So I think, like, obviously we'd been interested, and I think maybe a few clubs might have been interested, but they had a massive price tag on him, and obviously eventually they caved and sold him to Borough.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. It was over 10 million? I think Borough paid for him.
Yeah,
because I think they had a similar £10 million. I mean, I think that's probably what did scare the Premier League clubs off. Sorry, a little bit, paying 12, 15 mil or whatever it eventuated to be for a player that's never played in the Premier League, or only played in the division below the Premier League is a big price to pay. But he's worked his way on, and he's got there via promotion. So hopefully that he actually gets games, because I actually like him as a player. And when he was back at Huddersfield Town, and then he kept going on at another club at Blackburn Rovers, and so there's no reason he can't do it again. If he gets the game time.
And another player who's really worked his way up and looks a good prospect is a player for Burnley who we'll chat about now. Andre Gray is another striker, and I think, JD, you might know a bit about him from his time at Brentford. He's one that I really like the look of, and we were linked with him at the same time as we signed Odebajo from Brentford, and I was really hoping we'd get him, because I just knew if we signed him, he'd be that final piece in the puzzle, and he went to Burnley and proved me right, topping the goal scoring for the season. He's someone, I think, like in the same mould as a Callum Wilson or someone. I think he can have a really good debut season in the Premier League for Burnley.
Yeah, I think he's got definitely the attributes to be a good Premier League striker. He's quite quick, and he's not panicky in front of goal. I think I've watched him a few times at Brentford, and you could just tell that he could be the guy that, because it was when they were kind of pushing for playoff spots and stuff, that he was the guy that could push them up. Their Moneyball tactics were that, the bid they got, was it 10, 12 million they sold him for?
From Burnley. No, I think it was only maybe 6 or 7. I think it was 6 million with add-ons. So it might have ended up being 8 or 9 or something.
Yeah. So they obviously thought, they had targets in mind for about $1 million, but you just can't replace that Premier League quality when you're in the Championship, and that's what he definitely has. It'll be very interesting to see how he goes. I think he could definitely be the Gallo of this season, really.
he actually has got a Jamie Vardy sort of story. He started off in the conference, I think.
Yep.
He was playing for Shrewsbury Town and then went on loan, I think, a little bit in the conference, worked his way throughout the leagues, and now he's in the Premier League. So it's actually a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's a great story. I think he got stabbed in the face at some point in his career, so he's got a big scar down his face. And I remember reading a story about how he says that he's never kind of wanted to get that fixed up or anything because it sort of reminds him of where he's come from. And that sort of thing, hearing that from a player who's now in the Premier League is kind of quite refreshing to hear. And as you say, it's kind of similar to Vardy, where you look at those guys and they seem like proper footballers. They're not sort of
bit rough.
They're a
around the
bit rough,
edges.
bit rough. Not pretty keen
Old
for a
school.
scrap. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah,
and it makes a good viewing as well when you see players just so passionate and just don't give a crap.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think regardless of whether they stay up or not, I still think he'll get at least 10 goals
Yeah,
for them.
no, I agree.
Yeah, whether or not there's enough quality around him or not, I'm not too sure.
They've
But
I
yeah.
think they might struggle a little bit to stay up, but they don't want to become a yo-yo team, and if they go down again, they're going to get that reputation. And then it also
Yeah.
makes it really hard to sign players when you're always up and down, because you sign players in the Premier League and then they leave because you've just been relegated. And then when you're trying to recruit Premier League players, they don't want to go to your club because they think you're going to get relegated again. So
Well,
you really don't want that reputation of being a yo-yo team.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
they need it's hard to do, but they really need to try. And if they can stay up, it'll be huge for the club because they'll have that platform to then build on. And like West Brom were a yo-yo team for quite a while there, but they built off of where they were, dodge relegation now, and now they're a solid mid-table team. So like I think that's what Burnley need to go, and then once you're mid-table, you can fight for the Europa League, and obviously that's easier said than done, but they need to build off this platform that they've got. So hopefully
it's
they can. They won the
interesting though.
championship last year.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to have the same strategy as they had last time they went up, where they don't necessarily seem to care if they stay up, though. I mean, I know you're saying they need to avoid becoming that yo-yo club, but their quality of signings, not that I'm necessarily knocking them, but they're picking players. So last time they came up, I remember they signed George Boyd off us, and this time they've picked up a couple of players from Charlton, who I'm sure love the prospect of being Premier League footballers, but if they go down, wouldn't necessarily kick up a strop if they're back in the Championship. So I mean, Burnley's owners seem to be quite happy to, not in a malicious way, as we'll get onto with Hull, but they seem quite happy to pocket a lot of the money and use that as a fund for buying quality
Setting
when they're
them
back
up.
in the Championship. So buying players like Gray when they're down in the Championship. So I think they're sort of looking at a long-term view where, and I think they did it as well when they were up in 09-10, where they don't sign a heap of players, but they stay financially stable. They have a decent fund to buy players in the Championship, and over time, if that means they become a more stable Premier League club, then that's where they'll end up.
Yeah, well, I think they are doing, definitely playing their own kind of game with it, where they're putting a lot of the investment, I guess, off the field as well. I do think they've talking about new training facilities and stuff like that. So I guess their thinking is, signing these Charlton guys, if we do go down, we've got parachute payments and we've got guys who are capable in the lower division. I do think there comes a time, though, where they've got to pull the pin and have a go, and
I
it also
completely
makes
agree.
it hard. Makes it hard to keep Dyche as well. Like, they've obviously got a lot of faith in him, and he proves himself in the Championship every time. But second relegation probably would spell the end, and kind of defeats the purpose of what they've tried from the very beginning, because they haven't given him a proper chance to stay up.
Do you think
In recent history, I think the first time that they were promoted was about 2009, because I think they actually bet Everton like in one of their first games back up. Like that is 7 years ago. Like, if they're still trying to be a really good Championship club, like, where's the intent? I don't know. I'm not sold on it. I know if you don't have the money there, you can't go and buy all these players. So they're trying to do the best that they can with the funds there. That Moneyball tactic is sort of the way it has to be done. But I think they seriously have to just go hard or go home. I don't know. They need to start showing some serious intent, and it's hard, but I don't know. They need to go and try and make a statement of some respects. That can be done without having to spend a lot of money.
JD, when you say that a second relegation might be the final straw for Dyche, do you mean in the sense that they would sack him, or he might move on to another club that has a bit more ambition? Because I rate him quite highly as a manager. And
could be either, really.
Yeah, because I could easily see him getting a job at
be
the
either.
Crystal Palace or somewhere like that.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely could be either. He could say, well, my reputation's being ruined here. I only got that sense last time they were up. They weren't awful. They weren't like an Aston Villa where you're like, there's no idea here. It just looked like a championship team playing in the Premier League when Burnley were up. So, what can you do if you're Dyche? You can get the odd upset here or there, but you can't get 40 points. You're not going to stay in the league. So he'll definitely look at it. Unless he's already bought into a longer term, it'll be our third time up that we kind of consolidate. Whether or not, you don't know, the owners and manager might already have those talks in place where, they say to him this time, or the first time you've got, say, 5 mil to spend, this time you've got 10, 15. And then the third time you go up, we'll give you 30, 35. Like, it could be something like that. And it would be quite a good tactic for it, because they are very small, not rich championship club. But not a bad idea to play that card, but it does take a lot of commitment from everyone to buy into, it's a 5-year project and 2 relegations along the way. I don't see it being that, but you never know. That could be what they're thinking. I do see sides like Fulham and QPR and the way they go about it when they go down and come up has also not been the right way. So it's kind of a bit of a balance of both. What do you do? Do you start signing 30, 35-year-olds at Middlesbrough have, who, right now we think Valdez and Negredo are great, but these are the type of guys that got QPR and Fulham into a bit of strife. So yeah, there's a balancing act there, and we've seen now QPR and Fulham haven't gone close to promotion since they've gone down. So,
and they've both spent way more money than Burnley have.
Yeah, so you got to think about, it's quite easy to say, you've got no ambition here, but they've also kind of got a safety net where if Burnley do go down, they're going to finish top 6, whereas Fulham go down, and maybe not so much Newcastle this time, but when those sides with massive wage bills go down, and 7, 8 players leave and 10 come in, you never know where that could end up. Fulham, almost went down to League One doing that sort of tactic. So, I hope for their sake, even if they do go down, they stick with Dyche and he sticks with them and they have another crack at it. Because the money's got to be going somewhere, and like you're saying, they don't appear to be doing, there's no rumblings from Burnley fans or in the papers that they're doing anything dodgy. So the money's going somewhere. So there's it seems like there's a project.
Speaking
there's still a month of the window as well, so there's still time for them to do some stuff.
Speaking of clubs with owners doing something a bit dodgy, I think we'll move on to the final promoted club then, and talk about my club in Hull. And when I wrote up these previews and I wrote up notes for last weekend, I did up a list of all the signings each club had made, all the sales each club had made, and when I came to do it again for this week, I updated most of the clubs. With Hull, I didn't have to change anything because we still haven't made a single signing, and I think Sunderland and Stoke have now made signings, so I think we're officially the last club to do anything, and our caretaker manager came out after our last pre-season game last night and said he didn't think we were going to make any signings before the first game of the season. So we're almost definitely going to have a youth prospect getting some game time against Leicester, which will be interesting to see, and we'll have Jake Livermore or Tom Huddleston at centre back.
It is, it's ridiculous what's going on, but do you think, is it Michael Fowler? Is that who your caretaker is at the moment? Do you almost just have to give him the job for even just say, listen, you've got 6 months. we're giving you the job of building the team, because if you go wait a few more months, a few more weeks to bring in a new manager, then by the time the manager sits in, decides what if he has any money, what he's going to do with it, what players he's going to build the squad, it'll be October, November by the time he's even got his stamp on the club. Like, at least Mike knows the club. He'll be able to try and do something with it, and something is better than nothing.
Yeah, I think all the fans are basically just crying out for some certainty. I think there's been so much up in the air about possible takeover being scrapped, possible manager. We've been linked to Martinez, we've been linked to Coleman, we've been linked to Zola. We just want some sort of certainty, and a lot of people are saying just give it to Phelan, but the issue then is, if we give it to Phelan, it just shows that the club has absolutely no idea what they're doing, because they've wasted 2 weeks. I mean, technically, you could say it's not wasted. I mean, if we'd been able to get Martinez, perhaps that would have been a better option. But we've basically put transfer talks on hold while we search for a manager. And if we end up sticking with the caretaker and still have no signings to show for it, it just has such a bad look to it. There's some rumours that a Chinese consortium is very, very close to taking over the club. So some suspect that perhaps there's been no movement on the manager or signings front because they're sort of waiting to see what the potential new owners want to do with it all. Which, if that's the case, I'm not totally upset about, purely because that would mean that the Allams are gone. Anything that can end up with any sort of change or certainty at the club is good in my books. I think I just can't understand the thinking behind the Allams still being in charge, because they had an offer of about 100 million on the table from an American group a couple of weeks ago. Then they went back to them and asked for more money, and the American group got screwed around one too many times and basically walked away from it all. And since then, the value of the club is just declining, because injury after injury with no one to replace them, the Allams are basically just losing their own money to spite the fans.
It's probably right now, any potential new owner who has any idea about football, like, without being disrespectful to you, mate, you're almost buying a championship club right now, because it's going to be very hard to put a stamp on the club. So 100 million for a club that's playing in the championship is a lot of money.
But that's what I mean, exactly right. So when the offer came in from the Americans, it was basically when we got promoted. So right after that Wembley game, there was theoretically a deal in place that if we hadn't won that Wembley game, they would have bought the club for X amount, and if we did win the Wembley game, they buy the club for Y amount. And the Allams then reneged on that, because they looked at us being in the Premier League and suddenly turned around and went, oh, hang on, we want a bit more money than that. So that was the first time they went back on the deal, and then they went back again a few weeks ago, which I alluded to. But you're completely right, and that's what I'm saying is the Americans were willing to pay 100 million to buy a newly promoted
club, which is a lot of money.
And they were going to give Steve Bruce about £50 million to spend in the transfer market. So they were quite prepared to plough a lot of money into the club to keep us up and make us a Premier League club. But as you say, the position we're in now, any potential new owners, they're basically buying a championship club. We're not going to make any signings before the season starts. We probably won't make any before the window closes. And then we're as good as relegated, basically.
And if you look at, like, if I was a potential owner looking to buy a football club, like, if you go and buy a championship club, obviously there's not the money in it, but you could be paying a hell of a lot less, because 100 million sounds crazy. Wolves were just taken over, who played in the same league last year as you guys. They cost £40 million.
Yeah, and it's the much cheaper alternative. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No. Continue.
The only thing I can think of is that you look at our squad, and on paper, when fit, our squad is essentially a Premier League squad. When you look at, you've got Michael Dawson, Curtis Davies as very good centre-backs, and you've got Maguire as a good young prospect at centre-back, and then Andy Robertson and Odebajo at full-backs. That, as a defence alone, is a very top-quality defence. Not to mention the fact that Hernandez as a striker is a very promising striker who's also starting to look good internationally, and a pretty decent midfield with guys like Snodgrass and Livermore and guys like that. That's probably our weakest line. But on paper, there's a lot of promise in the squad. So the only thing I can think is if a group wanted to buy the club and they'd basically have to put about 50 million in January, and I don't know who you attract in January, but if they could stay up, then
could already be gone though by then.
Yeah, and that's the only thing I can think is that they'd be counting on us to stay up, rather than buying a club in the Championship and gambling on going up.
Do you think the Allams, what's their game in this? So, as a Championship club, will you running a profit? Like, because is this a case where they're banking parachute money for the time being, so they'll run you into the ground this season, take the money next season with a low wage bill, run at a profit, and then, you know, when the parachute money dwindles to a point that you're not breaking even in the Championship or League One, they sell for £1 sort of situation? Is that where they're going with this? Or
to be perfectly honest, I think what's happened is it all comes back to the name change issue. And since they had the initial bid was rejected, then they appealed that, and that was also rejected. And the day that was rejected, Assem and Ehab basically said he wasn't putting any more money into the club, and he's basically been true to his word, because since then, that January window, we basically signed, I think we signed Ndoye for 2 million or something, and that was out of the summer budget. And then the following summer, after relegation, we basically sold players to fund transfers. So since then, so basically since that appeal was rejected, he hasn't put anything in. But what I don't
was that just talk?
But what are they getting? What are they getting out though?
Yeah,
like, were you making money? Like, is there a profit going to directors here, or?
Yeah, well, we sold. I mean, they haven't released the accounts for the last 12 months, so I don't actually know specifically where the funds are going. But I know that they sold Chester and Brady alone for about 17 million, and then add, I think, about 2 million on top of that for Jelavic, and also Ince, I think, for about 5 million. So we made maybe 25 million last window, and bought in Odebajo was the most expensive at 3.5, but I think we wouldn't have spent more than about 7 million all up on transfers. So that window alone, they did pocket a bit of cash. They'd be pocketing cash this window from the Premier League money. And that's the only thing I can think, is that they're pocketing a lot of that money to basically pay down the debt. And maybe, I guess that's in a way a good thing. It makes the club more affordable for a new owner to buy. But your guess is as good as mine in terms of what their end game is in all of this.
Because it just doesn't make any sense if they're getting 100 mil sort of offer and they're not making 20 mil themselves a season while they're grinding this out. That just doesn't seem. It seemed worth it even for them.
I think billionaires like to say that they own a football club, that they're the chairman of the Premier League club whole city. They like it. They do stupid, crazy stuff sometimes.
But they're not really acting like an owner here. They're just sitting back and grinding something into the ground where it's, almost certain to get relegated the way it is now, and then. Do nothing again once they're in the Championship. I don't know the contract situation of these guys, but why would Dawson, Livermore, Snodgrass re-sign with you?
Yeah, and I don't think they will. I mean,
there's no point.
We were quite lucky. I mean, Huddleston and Elmo re-signed while Bruce was still here, and I bet they're regretting that now. But just as a final point, I think SM is quite ill, so there is also potentially the issue that the family is kind of focusing on spending time with him before he passes away. And that's the only defence I can think of in terms of why there's been so much inaction at the club recently. So hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully he is okay. But if that's the case, then that could explain why things have kind of ground to a halt. They've said that they're going to restart takeover talks once the window closes, so the only hope is that something can happen there. But until then, I think finishing any higher than 20th is probably out of the question. And the one question I wanted to pose to you guys is, do you reckon that we'll finish with more points than that Derby side?
Ask me in a month's time. No, I'm serious. A month is actually a long time in football. So much can happen. You're probably not going to stay up, but you don't want to be being the lowest point tally.
Even if it's really, very low.
Was it 8? Yeah. I thought it was 11.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah.
And even that's very low. How long are these injuries
So
You know,
Dawson's out for
saw
3
it.
months. Odebajo,
Yeah.
Bruce, and McGregor are all out for about 6 months.
Yeah. Well, then maybe the 8 points could be tackled here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it all depends as well on, you're saying youth kids are going to come in. Some of them might take their chance and show a bit, but yeah, I never saw that Derby side and wasn't right into it back then, so I don't know how doom and gloom looked back when Derby were there, but surely, what's that, 2 wins and 2 draws, or to say even 11, so 3 wins, 2 draws.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the target, just to beat that maybe.
Yeah, and we'll see how we go from there.
I've got a question for you,
Yeah.
SM. Like, can you even attack the loan market? Like,
Oh, you'd hope so.
you can bring in players without having to spend much.
Yeah.
It's like some of the big clubs have no worries loaning out their promising young players, like as Chelsea do, ridiculous amounts of, but loaning out, like getting promising young loanees from the top Premier League teams who would still be able to do a job for a club trying to avoid relegation.
And it's the
been...
weird one, because I think the rumour is that Mourinho's basically sitting by the phone saying, look, do you still want Phil Jones on loan? Because I think we were interested when Bruce was manager, and he's still pretty happy to loan us Phil Jones. So it's almost like there's a player sitting there ready to come across who plays in a position where we need depth. We have one fit centre-back. So I don't know. I mean, the owners apparently have approached City and Liverpool with loan bids for Benteke and Bonnie, which I think is a bit out of our reach, I suspect. I think they were willing to pay something like 15k a week for Benteke to take him on loan. I don't think Liverpool would have taken too kindly to that generous offer, but yeah, look, I mean, if nothing else, if we can bring in 2 loans, it would give us a few fit bodies and bolster the squad a little bit. So I have to hope something happens before the window closes.
Fingers crossed for you, mate.
Yeah, well, no worries. But thank you both for coming on, and also Cruyff for coming on earlier to chat all things football for the pre-season.
No worries.
Cheers, thanks for having us.
And thanks everyone for listening in. Hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast, even if I did get a bit glum at the end there. And we'll be back next week to preview the first set of fixtures, as well as round out the rest of the teams to preview. So until then, we'll see you on the forums.